Hi, everybody. This is Joe Firestone for Real Progressives, and it is 9 o'clock on Thursday night. And my guest for tonight is Bill Cimbrelo, a Democrat running for Congress in the Massachusetts 9th Congressional District. Well, you'll find, I think, that Bill is an extremely progressive Democrat who knows a lot about quite a lot of things. Okay, and I'm going to ask him to first start off by talking to us about the context of his race and who the primary person is that he is but trying to run against, okay, or is running against, and then we'll quickly switch to Bill's own platform and find out what is in his platform. So, Bill, if you'd like to start us off, that would be great.
Thank you, Joe. First of all, thank you for having me this evening. It's a real pleasure and a delight and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Bill.
Thanks. With regards to the reasons I'm running, if you will, basically.
Oops. Sorry, I inadvertently. Hi, Bill. I inadvertently kicked you out when I meant to put you on solo. So if you can start again, please.
All right, very good. So basically, the race here in Massachusetts is indicative of what's going on in the nation here. We've got the status quo has really brought us where we are. We have a Democratic Party that has swung to the middle, and in large part is responsible for why Trump happened. We really, as Democrats, did not do our homework and didn't support the home team, and the home team is the people at home. Instead, the centrist Democrats in the Congress have centered their support around the lobbyists, the special interests, and the PACs, et cetera. So, I'm running in this race because the status quo in many cases is literally killing us, and we have got to change the status quo. We've got to change the direction of this country. And I know that I cannot do any of that by myself. If elected, we need many progressives to get elected into Congress, as many as possible, to be able to really change the tide of where the nation has been going. So, again, the reason I'm running is just changing how things are going. And I look at my kids. So my kids are probably going to be okay, but are their kids when they have kids? I don't think so. Not the way we're heading right now. I don't think what we're doing right now is sustainable. So, as far as my own platform, I have a green economy platform. I support Tulsi Gabbard's Off Fossil Fuel for a Better Future Act, which I think is a huge step in the right direction. And I also support a fight for a $15 minimum wage and the expansion of Medicare for all, free college tuition. That also includes vocational school. And in fact, I'm really in favor of doing a pre-K through 16 educational program. Again, that includes vocational. And, that in essence, that's a major chunk of the platform that defines my candidacy.
Okay. You mentioned a number of things on your site. Healthcare, of course.
Right.
And you mentioned the fatalities issue.
Yes.
There are not really very many candidates who mention the fatalities issue, okay, and the importance of it.
Right.
You cited the figure of 45,000 Americans. That was true according to a study completed in 2005. I should say with data from 2005. The
Right.
study was actually completed in 2008, I think. But of course, since 2005, things really changed. There was the crash, and lots of Americans were thrown off health insurance. So presumably, due to growth of population and due to the economic events, it also has to be true that the fatalities probably went up very severely from 2005 to 2013, when the Affordable Care Act actually began to kick in, and it didn't really fully kick in until 2014. So, but we can assume that that's when the fatalities started to decrease substantially, okay, in those years. Then things began again to flatten out in 2015 and 2016, and we know that by the end of the Obama period, we know that things had started to level off, and that there was some 30 to 32 million people still not insured. And we also know from studies that have been done that 1 out of 781 of those people are fatalities as a result. Okay, now that's not a sure thing because there are really very few studies on this so far, but that's kind of an average fatality rate for the studies. So we're probably still looking at something like 37 to 38,000 fatalities per year due to lack of insurance. When we started off in 2009 to try to change that particular situation, we thought that we were at 45,000 fatalities, but we probably were at far more than that. So we cut into the problem just a little bit, but out of fear of putting the insurance companies out of business, we actually neglected to end the problem, and we're still left with a substantial number of fatalities, bankruptcies, also foreclosures, divorces. So all those things, okay, but coming out of the healthcare situation and still coming out of the healthcare situation.
Right, and I also don't think that figure really demonstrates the impact of prescription drugs that are out of reach for many.
Yes.
So that's sort of even a hidden entity there as well.
Yes, and because of that, and because of the kind of care which is available to people that have insurance, we probably have a higher fatality rate, okay, in relation to insured people than we otherwise would have. Okay, and so we really don't know what the total cost is of not being on a Medicare for All program. But we know it's very high in terms of the fatalities we suffered, probably an order of magnitude greater than the fatalities we suffered in the 9/11 attack. And yet, we're unwilling to spend at the same scale to end this problem.
Well, there's no profit in it if we can't send the military-industrial complex to conquer a nation and spend trillions of dollars.
Yes, of course, and that's something that you are very much against. Okay, I noticed. Okay, that's one of the issue areas you talk about on your site. Uh, okay, so could you tell us about the military spending area from your point of view, please?
Well, I think it's completely out of control. I think most people I talk to totally agree. I don't think we need what is it, $750 billion or more right now to be empire building around the globe. We've got 800 bases that we know of, and that's not even talking about the ones that they haven't told us about yet. So, I don't think that we are in any way promoting peace in the world by doing that. In fact, all the history is showing us that our presence and our butting into the various political and social affairs around the globe is really coming back to bite us on the butt. And to that extent, I also support Tulsi Gabbard's Stop Arming Terrorists Act, which it goes at least is a start in the right direction. So we can start to extricate ourselves from many of these things. One of the things that Eisenhower warned us about is the power of the military-industrial complex, and
Yes.
we didn't heed his advice. And one of the things that I am proposing, and in fact ties into some of the things I read in J.D. Alt's book, which we can talk about, is taking the profit out of war. Because
Yes.
if you can take the profit out of war, just like you can take the profit out of drilling for oil, right? Then that opens up avenues for all kinds of alternatives that otherwise wouldn't even be on the table. And
Yes, of course.
that's where I'd like to see, another use of, if possible, MMT and the whole process of how basically you tie up municipal bonds, right, to keep the oil in the ground. Well,
Yes. Indeed.
right.
Yeah.
So we can use similar strategies to keep the bombers on the ground, right?
Yes, we could. Absolutely, we could. So, can I infer then that if if it came to a vote again, that you would vote against the AUMF?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, you seem to be one of a growing number, of candidates who reply very quickly. I would absolutely vote against the AUMF, which is to say, I would use the authority of Congress to end the interventions all over the world by the executive branch, claiming to have the authority of Congress when it's not at all clear that they do. And I think that's a very important commitment for people to hear, on your part. You mentioned support for public schools from pre-K to 16.
Right.
Okay. So does that mean? Oh, I see. It says on your site you are for tuition-free schools.
Correct.
By going that far, would you extend that to the postgraduate level?
I'd have to think on that one. I think if it could be done, I think we would be smart as a nation to do that. I mean, if you look at what do we do with the student visas here in this country when we graduate our smartest students, highest trained and highest educated foreign students, and we say, oh, you're all now you're all educated, and send them back home because they can't stay anymore. So it's pretty preposterous what we do with those folks. So to the extent that we can have our own homegrown masters and PhDs, then I would like to see that happening. and if it can be done economically and made to work, and yeah.
Okay, but in the context, okay, of MMT and what it shows about the need about for deficit spending,
Yeah.
then we're talking about a relatively small cost to extend this to the graduate schools.
True enough. Yep.
And so there really doesn't seem to be a barrier, okay, that's economic to this. It's really a question of whether we want to give the same support to the people who are going further than simply college, that, for example, Germany does, and the Chinese do, and of course, quite a number, okay, of other societies comparable to our own with respect to wealth do. So it's rather strange that we do not, and I think it speaks to the idea that a considerable part, okay, of our society seems to have a desire to maintain inequality.
Oh, no question. Yeah, no question there. I look at this whole thing and MMT and what you're talking about here. It reminds me of the late Dr. Wayne Dyer's famous quote, which is change how you look at things and things change, right?
Yes.
Right.
That's the first time in a long time I've heard somebody quote Wayne Dyer, by the way.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. So, and it really, really holds true for MMT and everything we're talking about here, because it really turns everything on its head, but in a way that makes sense and is logical for so many things.
Okay, so under your jobs program, Bill, you want good paying jobs. And you say they're the backbone of an economy that's really strong, and that you want to fight to bring dignity back to workers by passing legislation that creates clean energy jobs, worker-owned cooperatives, and by fighting for a living wage for about all workers. So the first thought that comes to my mind is, why not be supporting legislation for a job guarantee program?
Well, I've looked into that, and again, I told you I've read J.D. Alt's book, and getting more and more into that concept. I don't have a big drawback that I can come up with that would say, oh, this is a bad thing. What I see here is that we're going to have a phased-in approach to anything that we try and do like this, because between now and whenever that program gets instituted, we can't let people fall by the wayside. So I don't think we can just say, okay, on such and such a date, now we've got a federal jobs guarantee program, and everyone has to wait until that point. So that's why on my platform is the Fight for 15. Now, the Fight for 15 is a Band-Aid as far as I'm concerned. We should be really fighting for 25, because, if you fight for 15, you might get 1150. So, I
feel that way too.
Okay. So that's part of the problem. And the other part of the problem is we've now given industry this tremendous tax cut. There's two things that have happened and are happening with that tax cut. A lot of companies are buying back their own stock.
Yeah,
number two,
knew that. Yeah, we knew that was going to happen.
Right. And the number two is that they're taking these extra funds and they're reinvesting not back into employees, but in technology to replace them.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly what we didn't want to happen.
Exactly what we didn't want to happen. So, look at Uber, right? So Uber was the great answer for so many millennials to, oh, you know, I lost everything, but at least I can make a living driving a car.
Yeah.
Well, what's Uber turned around and done? They've got automated drivers now. Then they're talking about bringing automated trucking and all the rest of it. So, you know, it's a race to the bottom. One of the things that isn't on my website is I've recently commented in other spheres. I would like to see that we put a break on this whole artificial intelligence and this whole rollout of R2D2 and C3PO, and actually charge corporations $120,000 per position that gets annihilated by automation. And that those monies then can be used for retraining or education, potentially a basic income. There's any number of ways those monies can be reinvested, help people start their own businesses, work or own cooperatives. But right now there's this attitude, oh, well, artificial intelligence and automation, it's inevitable. And we're just going to sit back, or we're going to just wait until the hammer falls on all of us. I don't think we can do that. And so I kind of want to do something to put the brakes on it. And at the same time, look how we're going to advance society so that it's a win-win. The people that are hurting now are only going to hurt a whole lot more if we don't put the brakes on this.
Okay, so let me comment on that in a few ways. Okay, first of all, there are applications, of artificial intelligence that we see now, which are dangerous to democracy. They invade our privacy. They subject us all to surveillance and also to manipulation, of our attitudes and our points of view. Okay, and I certainly agree with you that we have to regulate and end those applications of artificial intelligence, because those are dangerous to us. Now, I'm not sure I agree that the other kinds of applications that you're talking about, are actually dangerous to us. They may be dangerous to the jobs of people in the medium run to the long run. However, there are certain kinds of jobs that for the foreseeable future cannot be replaced by AI. And those are jobs that involve services by people to other people. And there is simply a myriad, of those jobs. And there's a huge amount of work to be done in the public sphere in the transition to a green energy economy, in the areas, of care for various parts of the population, that are not getting care now, in the repair, of our infrastructure, in education, in ending food deserts. There are so many areas where there are things to do that cannot be done by the machines. Sure. Which give people worthwhile jobs to do. Those jobs they would find worthwhile, that would use their skills, and that under a job guarantee program would pay about living wage. Now, we still have a situation where many of the proposals for a job guarantee program are at $15 an hour. Okay, I don't agree with those. The kind, that I want is in the neighborhood, okay, of $18 to $22 an hour, averaged across the country, with cost adjustments for the local area that someone, okay, is in. So, for example, if someone is in the middle of Boston, okay, or New York, the living wage, okay, that might be paid by the program could be $28 an hour, or $30 an hour, okay, something like that. So that is a sort of a different story from the standpoint of the detail, okay, of what would be paid. But the objections to such a program, based on the need for a transition, it seems to me fall down because you have a large number of people out there now who want to have a full-time job,
right,
who are simply getting denied the freedom to have one. In other words, we know that the government, through its pattern of spending, and because of the existence of the monetary system itself, is the creator of unemployment. That's why we have unemployment. In primitive societies, there's no unemployment. Okay, right. There's does not exist. But in our monetary societies, we created unemployment because it's a function of the cycles that happen to the private sector, okay, from time to time, okay, and so the policies that we go for in terms of the government either will maintain that kind of situation or end that kind of situation. A job guarantee for everyone would end involuntary forms, okay, of unemployment. And that's a great increase in the freedom of those who want to work. Sure. And who want, who would like to have a living wage. So I don't see the case that that could be made, to deny them that. Okay, which is what we have been doing for years and years and years. In other words, what the job guarantee is it's just a public option for having a full-time job, which would exist because the private sector is not capable of creating full employment for people. Right. So why should we wait?
Well, I don't think we should wait if it could happen tomorrow, but we know that reality is different because we know what we're dealing with in our nation's government. So
but that should not prevent us, okay, from advocating for it in our campaigns and saying it's the right way to go, okay, and the right thing to do, and taking up all of the negatives that will be brought to bear, okay, against it, and refuting the negatives, and talking for all of the positives. Okay, such a program. In other words, if we don't do that, then the job guarantee will never happen.
No, I don't misunderstand. I'm not saying I wouldn't promote it. I have already been promoting it, actually. It may not be on my website, but if you actually went through my tweets, you'd probably see something to that extent. My point here is, again, we've got to deal with the gap that we're going to necessarily have to live with to get to the point where something like the federal jobs guarantee can be implemented. And in the meantime, my only point is we can't have people falling through the crack more than they already are. We've got to stem the tide. Okay, and that really is the reasoning behind that 120,000 per AI job thing that I mentioned earlier. It's not a permanent fix. It's just let's put the brakes on. let's put these other programs in place, the job guarantee program, and then we can phase out the other, and then everything can work. Because industry's not going to be real happy about $120,000 tax every time they want to replace somebody at a cash register. They're just not. But by the same token, I think we've got to take all that into consideration.
Okay.
One of the things I was just looking at, if I may.
Here's a thought then.
Yeah.
Would you author a bill to put such a tax on business with a proviso that said that this tax will come off once a federal job guarantee program at a living wage is passed by Congress?
Yeah, I have no issue.
Put that in such a bill.
It's a great idea. I would have no issue putting that in a bill at all. It's a great idea. I love it. Yeah, it's good. One of the things
that would be an interesting strategy for getting the job guarantee through Congress.
Yeah.
However, I'm not sure that things would be as difficult, to get a job guarantee through Congress. But polls are now showing that a substantial majority of Americans are in favor of a job guarantee program. In other words, the polling is really starting to come in on that.
Right. So let me ask you a question, if I may. Again,
Sure.
I'm sorry, I keep referencing J.D. Alt's book, and in his book,
that's all right.
He talks about that the wage that someone on that program would be just below the minimum wage. Okay. I don't know how you would do that, but that's what he talks about in the book. And then he also talks about that none of these jobs, one of the requirements would be that none of these jobs could compete with an industry job. So in other words, I think it's fairly obvious. So I'm against that.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to respond by saying I think when JD specifies that, he's specifying a personal view.
Right. That's why I'm asking you.
Okay. The MMT view really is but different.
Okay.
In other words, the generalized MMT view. But that view is, and MMT people differ in terms of how much this is. But the general idea is that the federal job guarantee pay a living wage, a real, in other words, that's not just a PR term, an actual living wage. Right. And if there's no Medicare for All program by then it extends full Medicare benefits and fringe benefits that are very, very good to all the people in the program. So it's not just the living wage; it's also fringe benefits, that are very handsome fringe benefits. So that is the MMT view. And the rest of the MMT view is that, other than that, there be no minimum wage because there's no need for a minimum wage.
Right.
In other words, if people are being paid a minimum wage, which is less than a living wage, then if they are relatively sane people, they will go to their boss and say, will you exceed the living wage that is paid in the federal job guarantee program? And if their boss says no, then they'll say, well, I'll see you. And if the job guarantee program is in effect, that very day, they could sign up for the job guarantee program and begin to get paid.
Right.
Okay. So this is a pretty strong incentive for the employers in the private sector to say, well, okay, we're just going to have to do this. In other words, that's going to be the minimum wage. It relies on the power of the federal government to set that wage through the job guarantee program.
Right.
Okay, so I don't think JD is right, okay, in saying that the wage and the job guarantee program ought to be set, okay, at less than a legal minimum wage. In fact, I've never heard any other person who subscribes to MMT say that.
Right. But he also, as I said, he also says that it shouldn't compete with an ongoing business, and I disagree with that. As you read in my my issues page, I'm a huge proponent of worker-owned cooperatives, and so I would love nothing more to be able to empower people and have their own businesses and group together and have any kind of business. Right now there's fruit stands, there's farms and that kind of thing. But let's do engineering firms, let's do architectural firms, let's do technical stuff, let's do bring back appliance building in this country. All these things. We have a history of creating all this technology and then shipping it all overseas to be made elsewhere. And part of the reason is that we're paying CEOs these ridiculous sums of money, and we've got to pay shareholders their take. But if we can bring all that manufacturing back into the United States and pay people to make products and be part of the solution, then that's empowerment, and that's what I'm really all about. That's how we're going to end the 43 million people that are in poverty, is by empowering them and giving them options that they don't currently have.
Okay, so I think the MMT view on this question is that the intention of the federal job guarantee program is not to compete with the private sector, okay, and that but the way the program would be restricted or would be limited from competing with the private sector is by considering whether an enterprise that is proposed for the job guarantee program, such as a cooperative enterprise, for example, has a public purpose or not. Okay, in other words, if the endeavor is something that contributes to a public purpose or fulfills a public purpose, then it would come under the heading of a social enterprise that could be supported by the job guarantee program. Now, who would make that kind of decision? In relation to the job guarantee program, it would be the local stakeholders that are structuring the jobs for each of the localities in the United States. And these stakeholders, including the participants in the program themselves, would be functioning in the context of the job offices. The unemployment offices would be turned into real job centers.
Sure.
Honest to goodness centers, which would begin with lists of jobs that already exist and that are obviously involved with the public purpose. Okay. However, the way would be open for people to propose about new jobs in relation to social enterprises that also did something for the public that was not being done now by the private sector, or that was being done badly by the private sector. Okay, in other words, there are many areas of the private sector where obviously there are market failures. For example, in the health insurance area, there's definitely been a market failure there. So in those areas, the job guarantee program would be free to enter. But in certain other areas where it was fairly clear to people that the private sector was doing a good job, then the job guarantee program would not be entering those areas.
So, if I may, define what's a good job, because if a company is making widgets and those widgets are being made in China and at a fraction of the cost, and all they're really doing is they're making the widgets there and then they're bringing them here and they're selling it, is that doing a good job? And who is it doing a good job for?
Okay. I think that's a very good question. And the way the Job Guarantee Program, I think, would answer that question, okay, is by asking, trying to relate the situation to the public purpose. And I think the local authorities would ask such things as, is it really good for the United States and for the citizens of the United States to have these widgets actually made over in China or somewhere else when they could be made here? Mm-hmm. And okay, now it's possible that we could get them from China at a lower cost, but is the cost differential a sufficient justification to say that having this done over in China is consistent with the public purpose or not? I submit to you that many, many local areas in the country, okay, would judge, no, that's not consistent with the public purpose. Okay, it might be good for the owners of this business, but it's not good, okay, for our workers, for our laborers, for our citizens. And so if someone comes in with a cooperative proposal to do something similar, then the evaluation of public purpose involved would go in favor of the cooperative organization. Okay, and by the way, I'm very favorable to cooperatives as well. I'm convinced by Rick Wolf's arguments, okay, about the effectiveness of having a large cooperative sector inside of the economy of the United States. And I think just having that is an important thing for getting to public purpose, because it creates democracy in the workplace.
Absolutely.
And that in itself is a value that should be tremendously important to us that we don't have in the workplace now. So we live most of our lives outside of a democratic situation. Then we walk around and say we're a democracy and the greatest one in the world besides. Right. I mean, it's all imaginary fantasy. If we want to make it a reality, we have to have a cooperative economy. But to be clear, the businesses in such an economy would not be owned by the government. They would still be private businesses, but they would be social enterprises, which would be dedicated but to a public purpose. So I think this is perfectly realizable within the confines of a job guarantee program.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. I mean, there's so many myriads of ways that we could make that work. I mean, you saw now President Trump put a 30% tariff on Chinese solar panels. So, that's going to obviously is already hurting that industry. And to the extent that can we bring back these technologies that we've shipped overseas to enrich CEOs and shareholders, and to the extent that we can bring opportunity back to the United States. And one of the things, the real trickle down, as I think we know, it has to be when consumers are making enough money to be able to go purchase at reasonable prices, at competitive prices, and the sales tax and all that gets funneled down to communities. Communities right now they're starving for income, and you got companies like Amazon that are going in and making all kinds of demands on lowering taxes, and it's just we're chasing our tail. It's just got to stop.
Right, but with respect to that kind of thing going on, I think the obvious remedy for that is to have a revenue sharing type of program again, where the federal government sets up a fund for the state governments and for the local governments to supplement their finances when we have a downturn in the economy. The states and local governments were doing fine before the crash of 2008. I mean, tax collections were going very, very well. Okay, and they were investing in all kinds of things, and then suddenly the money was gone. And some of the firemen were fired, some of the police were fired, some of the teachers were fired. There was tremendous stress on the schools. All of that could have been ended with a proper recovery program that gave aid to the states and the local governments. And by the way, MMT people were proposing such a program, okay, at that time, in the proportion of $1,000 for each person in the state to support that kind of program. With that kind of money going to the states, there wouldn't have been any layoffs then.
Right.
Okay. So I think that's the way to fight the Amazons of the world. If the states and the cities don't really need money, then it's going to be hard for Amazon to get tax breaks from them.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's a race to the bottom right now, and again, we have to stop. We talked before.
And the only entity that's capable of ending the race to the bottom is the federal government, because of its capability as a monetary sovereign.
So, Joe, here's the conundrum. We all know this. So we've got a Congress that works for the lobbyists, that works for corporate America, it works for special interests, right? So what do we have to do now to be able to go into Congress and say, look, you're not going to work for these special interests anymore. You're going to work for the greater population. And in order for that to happen, folks like myself and a whole bunch of other progressives that understand and believe in MMT and the concepts that we're talking about have got to get elected. And because otherwise you got folks like Tulsi Gabbard or Ro Khanna, and they're like out there waving in the wind. And
right. And I completely agree. The first part of the solution is a political solution.
Right.
Okay, and it means that those people who are willing to take a chance and not take any corporate contributions have to be elected to Congress. In other words, that has to be a requirement for someone to vote for a candidate.
Right.
And as soon as a candidate is caught taking some contributions from corporations, then the rule should be vote against that candidate. It doesn't matter who it is, vote against that candidate. Okay.
So you're with me.
Kind of rule. Yes, I am absolutely with you on this. I think, okay, that's an answer.
So not any blue will do.
Not any blue will do, absolutely.
Right.
And furthermore, once we create a block of 30 to 50 progressives in Congress who really understand how you're going to pay for it, then that's probably enough people within the House, of Representatives to force the government or to force the rest of the Congress through leverage in the debt ceiling situation, to force the Congress to implement the kind of clause we need in appropriations legislation and CR legislation to take the national debt issue off the table and to directly pay for things. Now, I think you've seen some of this language already. Have you?
Which, more specifically?
The overt congressional financing language.
No, I haven't spent a lot of time there, to be honest. No, have not.
Okay, so I'm going to put it up on
Gonna make me put my
solo.
glasses on.
Okay, just for a minute. Okay, it won't take
Okay.
long. Okay,
All right.
I'll put it up on solo here.
All right.
Okay, so this is an approximation to the legislative language, okay, that would be necessary to create that situation. Okay,
Right.
if this language, okay, is implemented, then it makes clear to people that taxes don't fund spending,
Right.
that only Congress actually funds spending. First, through the appropriations bill, and second, through this language at the end of the appropriations bill, which orders the Federal Reserve to place the reserves necessary for spending in the Treasury's spending account.
Right.
Okay, and that also makes clear to people that this language as well will provide for the gradual payoff of the national debt. Well, why pay off the national debt? Since MMT shows that actually the national debt isn't at all significant for fiscal sustainability. It doesn't matter what the debt is. It could be zero. It could be 200 trillion. The fiscal sustainability of the United States, in other words, the capacity to spend, would still be exactly the same. Okay, so why get rid of the national debt? Because it's a political problem. As long as we have the national debt, then the Peterson Foundations of the world and the whole industry in Washington of terrorism over the debt is empowered. Okay, but if you can end the debt issue, which these two sentences would do within 6 months, because so much of the debt can be paid off in 6 months, that it would be visible to the public, okay, that the debt would have been reduced within 6 months by roughly $4 trillion. In other words, people wouldn't be able to talk about a $21 trillion debt anymore. Okay, suddenly they'd be talking about a $17 trillion debt, and at the end of 1 year, probably a $14 trillion debt. So it would immediately
What does that
be
do to inflation, though?
It doesn't do anything to inflation because the debt is paid off only as it falls due, and that doesn't have an inflationary effect. But we're running out of time, and I can't explain in this broadcast why it doesn't have an inflationary effect. But after the broadcast, I'll be able to explain it to you. Okay. Okay. I usually get some objections to this based on the complexity of the language in these two sentences. Okay. Well, I submit that first, this language isn't very complex for the kind of legislative language that you find in the Congress. But I also want to suggest that for debates and for forums and situations like that, this language can be greatly simplified. Okay, in fact, it can be simplified to such an extent that okay, I clicked on the wrong thing, sorry. Let me find it again. Okay, so where am I? Here it is. It can be simplified to such an extent that when asked a question like, your programs look expensive, how are you going to pay for them? The answer can be as simple as, we're Congress. We'll just order the Federal Reserve to give Treasury the money. That is what it simplifies down to.
Right.
We'll give Treasury the money to pay for the appropriations we just made. We'll give Treasury the money to pay off the national debt that falls due during the period of the appropriation.
But you're only advocating that we do that for political reasons, not because we need to.
I am advocating that we do that for political reasons, because if we don't do that, then we're going to get this debt propaganda machine in Washington, okay, in New York, okay, and internationally, coming down on progressive heads full force and making us look really, really ridiculous. But if we do this, and if within 6 months it's visible to the public, okay, that the national debt was never a problem at all and is not a problem now because, see, we reduced it by $4 trillion in 6 months, then I think that ends the problem. Okay, so I'm on a hard deadline here tonight, unfortunately. Okay, I promise to limit this, okay, to only an hour, because I'm known for having these events go 3 hours or 4 hours. Okay, so I'm going to have to end this now. I do want to give you a chance, though, to give your donation information.
Sure.
Before we close.
I appreciate that, Joe. So our website for information and also for donating and also for volunteering is billcimbrelo.com, and that's CIM as in man, B as in boy, RELO. And many of you I see here are from Twitter. I recognize the photos, and you can find me there at Bill_Cimbrelo, and also on Facebook with Bill Cimbrelo also. So I hope to hear from you, and please donate whenever and whatever you can, because that's the only way we're going to beat the status quo.
Okay, so thank you, Bill, for being here tonight. It was really a pleasure to interview you, and I hope you'll be able to come back soon.
I would love that very much. Thank you.
Okay, what I'd like to do soon, okay, is to create just a Q&A situation.
Okay.
Have people who come in just but question us. I think that
great.
Might be something people, would want to do.
Okay,
so thanks a lot. Okay, and I will disconnect you now. Okay, and myself too. So good night, everybody.